Tonight on The National, Ontario crash. Some survivors, some fatalities as a jet goes down.
The plane took off in heavy snow and crashed seconds later about 2 kilometers past the end of the runway. The aircraft apparently dipped one wing shortly after takeoff, then stabilized for a moment before plowing into the forest. A passerby who arrived at the site shortly after the crash told me he saw burnt and bleeding passengers staggering away from the plane through waist-deep snow. Investigators say it will take days, perhaps weeks, to establish the cause of today's disaster.
There was wet snow falling at the time the plane took off, and the temperature was hovering around zero. Safety officials say weather conditions like that can create an icing problem for aircraft. Fire engulfed the aircraft after impact. That damaged the flight recorders in the tail of the plane and destroyed the tapes inside containing flight information. Paul Adams, CBC News, Dryden.
This accident occurred basically because there was too much snow and ice on the wings, and the airplane took off and crashed. The interesting result of this was that we started to realize that it wasn't just the pilots that needed this teamwork training, but in addition, how about the flight attendants? There was 2 pilots that were flying in the back of that airplane. One flew for Air Canada, the other one flew for the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. Both realized that maybe there was too much snow and ice on the wings. One said, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police said something to the flight attendant, and the flight attendant essentially said, "Oh, I'm sure the pilot's aware of it, don't worry about it." Instead of bringing that information up to the front of the plane, saying, "Hey, we got a pilot back here that thinks there's a problem." The Air Canada pilot elected not to say anything, and he survived the accident, was interviewed afterwards, and they said, "Well, why?" And he said, "Because, this is a commuter airline, it's a smaller, airline. I don't want to act like I'm Mr. Air Canada and tell them how to do their job." Common language. These are the cuss words. So one of the things that you can do when you advocate or you communicate any kind of communication is to include that level of concern in your communication. So you start with a lower level, "I'm concerned," and these are common words we're used anyway, but if it becomes part of the vernacular in your OR, your ears should perk up. When somebody says, "I think this is a patient safety issue," everybody should stop what they're doing and figure out whether or not it is or not. So use the cuss words. These are the cuss words we prefer versus those other ones. Liability claims, when you look at this, we find that substantial harm to patients, 90% of the time, somebody on the team knew that there was something wrong. But they either kept silent or they were ignored. Communications is a big reason why we have these errors and things happen. Patients pay a high price for dysfunctional teamwork.